Hey guys, welcome to Hope It Helps. And my guest on the show today is Miss Dani Hakim. Dani, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time. So Dani, me and you connected actually, I think a few months ago through LinkedIn, and we've been in touch back and forth. And actually, your co-founder Helen was supposed to come on the show, but she's not feeling well. So I thank you for taking her place instead. And I've been following Safe Space for quite a while now. I got put onto it a few months ago by a friend of mine, and they're like, check it out because it's the mental health space, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about as well. So I'm like, I'd love to speak to you. I love the work that you guys do, and I think it's so needed right now, especially given everything that's going on. But before we get into everything, Dani, why don't you give all of us just a little bit of background about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Cool. So my name's Dani Hakim, one of the three co-founders of Safe Space. And in a past life, I was a healthcare marketing consultant. So we have set up Safe Space to provide a more preventive and proactive solution within the mental health spectrum. And that's very much using the power of marketing, the lens of marketing, which is all about engaging with people, helping people find something a little bit more digestible and easy to kind of get along with, and applying that to mental health, because it's a very big, scary topic.
Yeah.
It's something that's very clinical and owned by, the clinics and psychiatry and medication and, all these kind of big, scary mental illnesses that people shut down to. They don't open up in conversation to because they're put in this kind of scary category. So really we want to look at the whole spectrum of mental health, so even mental wellness. And there's that sort of a statistic that a lot of people use, that 1 in 4 of us will struggle with our mental health. What about the other 3 in the 4? We all have mental health. It's all available to all of us. It's just as present as physical health. What are we doing to maintain it? What are we doing to understand it and engage with it? And hopefully through doing that, we believe that we'll be able to prevent a lot of, worries from escalating into mental illness where possible. So working quite closely with clinics and clinicians, mental health professionals, experts, coaches, therapists, counsellors, to bring together this platform of content for people to interact with.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a very good point about, the 1 in 4, but what about the other 3? Because people use that statistic and you forget that mental health is, I think a lot of people have a perception of mental health is like something quite traumatic, but also the concept of trauma is very subjective. Any little thing can be considered a trauma too. It doesn't have to be such a huge traumatic experience. So I totally agree with that point. And you said something interesting, because I listened to actually your podcast with Mimi, who I've also had on the podcast. And she's amazing, speaking about empathy and so on.
Baby.
And you said something on the podcast which I thought was interesting, that advertising misses the mark when promoting health. Now, I was thinking, I'm like, that's actually quite true. So the question I have is, why do you think that is? And given everything now that's happened this year specifically, how do you think that's changed?
So health is a $1,000,000,000,000 industry. I don't know the figures. There's a lot of cash that's out there. Companies that are profiting from sowing the seeds of doubt into people that they're not healthy enough, or they're not fast enough, or they're not thin enough, or they're not good enough, or they're not this enough, in order to be able to give them a solution, their product. So I think we've kind of got really in a position where, because we started with like the physical health revolution first, and now we have this really hardcore media instigated view of what health looks like, and now we're kind of moving into more of a mental health. So people are kind of like waking up, people are becoming more aware of their body as a holistic being. Everything's just jarring and mismatching. So I've been, let's say, both disillusioned and inspired by that kind of progression of what health is, because I think, again, not just mental health, but health is a very subjective term. It means different things to different people.
Of course.
People can look at me and think that I'm not healthy because I live in a larger body, but I do things differently to how we're all unique, we're all very different. And I think because we have this perception of what health looks like, it's very difficult to see that dimension of what health actually is. I have truckloads of healthy coping mechanisms. I treat my body with respect, and I'm kind and I'm compassionate, and to me that's what health looks like. But actually on the outside, that people can't really see that depth. So I think we have lost our way a little bit. Again, coming from a healthcare background, working very closely with clinics, hospitals, big pharma groups, trying to really understand what is at the core of this. Do people really in these businesses want people to be healthier? Do they truly believe that what they're doing is rolling up to make people healthier? I use those speech quotes around for healthier, sure. Because it's subjective and it's different for us all. So I think the whole transformation that we're on at the moment, where we're looking at mental health and what, this is going to be the decade of mental health. 2020 really set us up for sure. The catalyst and threw us in at the deep end without an oxygen mask. And I think it's really just bringing it back to self-awareness. So it's not about health anymore. It's just about being in our own world, not even our own bodies, but our own world, and figuring out what that looks like and knowing ourselves. Yeah. Because I think we're quite far in a lot of times from where that sort of core is at the moment. Yeah, and I think I totally agree with that, actually. I think there's still a lot of work to do. But now the conversation, I think, is it's very out there. Like, a lot of people talk about mental health. It's not as, what's the word? Like, airy-fairy as it used to be. There's actually now, like, companies and there's actually people in that space that are actually doing good work to promote that. And that actually moves on well to my next question. So we all talk about breaking the stigma behind mental health. Everyone calls it a stigma. And I've spoken to many people on the podcast about this. And one of the people I had, Ali, who actually you guys actually spoke to as well, was talking about how bringing self-awareness and breaking the stigma is great, but how do we now translate that into actionable change? What he was saying is to start putting in programs in like schools and, in businesses, especially like in schools, because if you've grown up with like training or awareness about mental health and like your emotions and how you think, later on, if you extrapolate that, people are going to be more aware, like the next generation and so on. But what do you think, in your opinion, are the steps that we need to start taking to actually make that change instead of just making awareness? Yeah, I think we don't really like talking about the stigma because I think it gives it more airtime than it needs. Yeah. I think I was talking about this the other day and I can't remember who I was talking to about it, but the cultural differences that obviously we experience here in the region are a little bit different to the rest of the world. We have to be mindful of where they came from. We have to be mindful of where we got, how have we got to where we're at now, where there are still people in society that believe mental health is a myth, or that it's a curse, or that it's whatever that train of thought is. But I think in order to be able to, a lot of the language we use against it, like let's tackle stigma or fight stigma or break stigma, you're going at it with the same negative force. Whereas actually, if you if that thing was like a small vulnerable child, you would want to go at them with open arms, and you would want to learn about their history and hear stories of where they came from in order to then be able to sow seeds in order to be able to make that transformation and action happen. So I believe that action can happen in lots of different formats and has to happen in lots of different formats because, again, humans are unique and we're all on a different journey and we're all on a different path and from a different culture and a level of understanding of what that means. So if we came at it with one solution, it wouldn't be enough. Yeah. And that's why it's so important that people like Ali, messages like Mimi's, the work that Lorna's doing and that we're doing, like, it's all important because everybody needs that safe space. Everybody needs that little community that they can hear that person's message or that perspective, listen to it, hear it, have space held for them that they can go and interact with it and then start their own journey. But really it's for like people like us to sow the seeds. We can't drag people 100%. to the finish line. Yeah. We can put it out there and allow that sort of message to blossom, but people have to be ready to transform. You can't make them transform. 100%. So I think that having lots of initiatives at every level is important. I think that, and great that governments are starting to get behind this. Yeah. I think one area challenge that we do have in the region is around funding, especially for sort of grassroots initiatives like this. In the rest of the world, these areas are kind of prioritized as almost like budget items, and it's happening. It is happening that more is becoming available. And even from like a business perspective, I think more organizations we're seeing specifically, because that's our area, is that they're realizing that it's good for business
Yeah.
Governments should realize it's good for society. Families should realize it's good for cohesiveness and connectivity. So once people are aware of the benefits, then hopefully we can get a few more people on the train.
Yeah, and I think you made a very good point that you need a lot of voices and a lot of different voices, because like even from the people you mentioned, like Ali might say something that someone might resonate with that's maybe from the same background as someone, and me might say something that someone else would resonate with. So you need, the more people that are putting that message out there, the bigger the audience that you can bring in, and hopefully from that, that's when the change can like start to happen.
Yeah.
And I had Dr. Salihad, who's the founder of Lighthouse, on the show as well, and she said something that always stuck with me, because I didn't expect her to say it. She was like, I don't like the term mental health. I'm like, okay. I was surprised. I'm like, because mental health is that buzzword that we all use and so on. She's like, I like to look at it as mental hygiene. Mm-hmm. She's like, think of it like this. Like, when you think of personal hygiene, what do you do every day? You have a shower, you brush your teeth. It's the daily work you do to take care of yourself physically. So she's like, you have to look at mental hygiene or mental health in the same way, because I think when you shift it from mental health to mental hygiene, your perception of it changes, because it's a lot more relatable to you, that because you do personal hygiene every day. What do you think about that? Do you think that holds true, or what would you say?
Yeah, for sure. And obviously Dr. Salihad is the queen of this in this, in this space. So
yeah, for sure.
And I'm totally on that train of thought, because we think about, and I've said this before, like we care about our dental health more than we care about our mental health. We're going to go to the dentist for our 6-month checkup without even thinking or considering that that's a weird thing to do. We brush our teeth every single day, most time twice a day, because it's, been drilled into us from a young age.
Exactly.
So I'm all for throwing out terminology that doesn't work for moving people closer to, a more conscious society.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this from a safe space perspective. Again, from our marketing lenses, what we're trying to do is rebrand mental health. So whether it is through terminology, labels, the visuals, the content, the word, like everything that you see surrounded in this space, however people can interact with it and engage with it is better for us.
For sure.
So if that term works, it's good to help people to understand. And I think there's going to be so many different ways to approach it. I think it's just bringing it down to a level that helps people to, first of all, first step, see the difference between mental illness and mental health.
Yeah.
Because that term is used as a catch-all, and that's really dangerous, because that isn't sort of a true representation. So whatever we can do to mix up this terminology, to switch even one person on to a daily practice, I'm all for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you made a very good point, that you have to really bring it down. And I think that's a crucial distinction between mental illness and mental health, because when someone typically says you're struggling with mental health, the general population would be like, oh, that's a mental illness. There's something wrong with them. But that's not true. Like if you suffer from anxiety, which is something every human, it's a normal human emotion that we all experience at different times.
Yeah.
And what I've learned in my experience, with my own experience with mental health and speaking to a lot of other people, is that anyone who enters this field has their own unique experience. There's a reason you went through something and you made a transformation and you're the person you are now, and you want to share that message with everyone, because a lot of people probably are feeling the same way. Now, I know in your case that you mentioned that you struggled with depression and anxiety for a lot of part of your life, and also postnatal depression. And what I like to do when I'm having these conversations, just ask people, what was that experience like? Because Ali went through something. Ali told me he went through depression, and I wanted to understand from him, what was going on in your head? What were the thoughts? Because I think that is what a lot of people can relate to. Yeah. To say like, oh, I suffered with that is great, but what were you actually feeling during that time? I'm
not going to swear, because I'm going to keep it PC.
Okay. It's your show. You can do whatever you want.
It felt really crap. And I can look back and laugh now, but at the time, just feeling literally like you were, watching everybody around you, and like they were in this kind of like Disneyland, and you were literally clinging on for dear life inside, but not being able to say it out loud, because that wouldn't have been acceptable, or you wouldn't know how people would receive you, or you'd not been seen to be that person, so you didn't want to become that person. And I think it was just, I think the one word is exhausting. Like having to pretend that you're okay, having to, on not even a daily basis, like an hourly basis, like bring everything, every element of energy you have to just get through without crying or without shouting at someone or without feeling the feelings.
Yeah.
And to push those down, it takes so much strength.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it like that at the time. I just saw it as what's wrong with me? Why I don't deserve this? I'm a good person. What have I done to like make this happen? Why won't it go away? There was just so much like questions and confusions really. And I think the only way I kind of got to a certain point was just accepting that this is me. Like this is just my personality.
Okay.
Which in a way was a step forward. I think it's allowed me to just kind of get on with things a little bit, but not really address them. So I've always lived. I live with chronic pain. So I had a problem with my back when I was quite young, multiple operations, which has kind of left me still in a lot of pain. So having to deal with that was like a real catalyst for all of this, because I was just always so annoyed that nobody could really understand what pain I was in.
Yeah.
I wanted a scar across my face. I wanted half my arm to be missing so people could see me and feel sorry for me. Like, give me the leeway, you know, not tell me to hurry up when I couldn't move fast, or like give me a little bit of space, of compassion.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was like a really strange thing to kind of have to deal with. And I think because of that, I have always lived in a sort of mode of depression. Again, that why me type conversation. But also then having to have like a really high functioning level of anxiety to get me through. You know, so my anxiety on the outside is my kind of relentless nature for getting things right, and, you know, not stopping until we've, you know, ticked every box, and, you know, people pleasing and all these other things that are just sort of, you think they're again part of who you are, but they're just coping mechanisms. So it wasn't really until I had my first baby, and I did struggle with postnatal depression, but it was, at that point, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
So I was in a meeting with a really big senior client, and she gave me some bad feedback, and I broke down. You know, I just couldn't that was it. That was
just hit.
Too much at that point.
For sure.
So it was very apparent at that point that I couldn't keep in what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, to cry in a client meeting as an account director, as a senior leader in like the organization, was just like career suicide at that point, because it was like, how are you ever going to come back from this?
Yeah.
And then there was comments of, you're not the person we hired, like you've changed, you know. But in essence, it was those comments that led me to getting help, because I was like, I'm going to lose my job. And I can't lose my job because now I've got to pay for children. I'm going to have school fees, and you know, and it was a good a good thing in a way, because it did force me to kind of reach out and get help. But it was just sad that I had to get to that point and allow this. You know, I started struggling when I was 17, so like from 17 to 33. It's a long time to struggle.
It's 16 years, yeah.
It's a long time.
It's a lot of built-up stuff.
Yeah, so I think now I can kind of see everything a little bit more clearly. I do my mental hygiene. I've got loads of, I've got better coping mechanisms now than I've ever had. I've got a support network around me who I communicate with, who I understand. And now the cherry on the cake, me being able to use my path, my journey, my story, and actually now being the perfect person to do what I'm doing, you know, with my background, but also with my journey, to have true empathy for how bad it can get. I don't want people to get there, and that's why we play in the space that we do. It's just not somewhere that I want people to go. Yeah.
And first of all, thank you so much for sharing that story, because I think that hearing those stories are what people relate to the most. You know, how did you actually feel? How was that experience for you? And at that point, you went out and you got help. So was it like psychotherapy, or was it just what were the kind of things that you did?
So I worked with a coach. Okay. And that was, again, looking back at it, you know, through sort of critical eyes, because I still didn't feel that I was at the point that needed psychotherapy or a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'd been on antidepressant medication when I was 18. I hated the way that it made me feel. It didn't fix my problems, which I never gave it the chance, and I also wasn't treated holistically and given talk therapy to go with it.
Yeah.
But it was just the way, the more socially acceptable way that I felt that I could start this process.
Yeah.
So I chose someone, and kind of, again, I don't know, the universe kind of threw us together, who essentially on the outset had this, the marketing that she was doing, where it would have made me a better, more like executive coaching was even in her spectrum, but it would have made me a better person in those senses, not I'm here to solve your mental health challenges.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I felt that I could start there.
Okay.
I only actually had therapy for the first time in July this year.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, which is quite ironic, isn't it? So I'm running a mental health initiative because I have developed this tolerance, not resilience, but tolerance for just getting through. And it's now only, throughout the lockdown, and actually really wanting to go a lot deeper into sort of some of the ways I've coped, and trying to kind of get to the root of those. So now I'm like an open book. I'll try anything, try anything and everything, because I see how it's going to give me the ability to be there for my friends, family, and essentially for safe space.
Yeah, no, that's true. And on the therapy part, so this was the first year that you went. This was the first year I actually went to therapy this year too, for the first time. Yeah, thank you. And I went to Lighthouse, so that's how I could, found out about like all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it for a couple of years, but it was I never reached the point that I'm like, okay, now I really need it. And this year, I think like many people, and sounds like you too, I just reached the point I'm like, okay, I've read the books, I've watched the talks, I've done I have the awareness, but that doesn't change anything. And for me, it was an amazing experience. It really helped I don't think it cleared everything, but it definitely removed a lot of the blocks that were there before and changed my perception on a lot of things. So how I did 4 sessions, and for me, I felt I got to a point I'm like, okay, that's enough. How many sessions have you done? How has that experience been for you now, being able to actually just voice all these things that you've been using to just cope instead?
Yeah, so I've had weekly sessions.
Okay.
From I think it was July onwards, every single week, because and it's funny, the how I actually got to that session is again through my back pain. So, and I've been doing a lot of reading around the mind-body connection, and realizing that a lot of my pain is held tension from, again, holding in my emotions, not having my emotional needs met as a child, and literally not being able to allow my body to heal.
Yeah.
So throughout that process, the book that I'd read, I randomly found a psychotherapist based in the UK who had worked with this doctor, Dr. John Sarno, who had read this book, and then the rest is history, as they say. I got in touch with her, and really to work on how I could not have this back pain. So keeping it very, very top level. Yeah. The one thing that I felt has been the root cause of all my struggles, spoiler alert, turns out wasn't. It's actually the emotional stuff, traumatic things that have happened, throughout my life that I've not dealt with and that I've kind of suppressed. So I probably need to be in therapy for the rest of my life, but I enjoy the relief that it gives me on that weekly basis now. Yeah. So sometimes I do feel like, oh, I don't have anything to talk to her today, and she always asks me that question, how are you today? And sometimes she's sort of quite pensive. She's waiting for a big explosion from me, and I'm just yeah, I've been okay this week.
Yeah.
And then there's a little bit of probing, and there'll always be something that I've learned from that week, or something that I've been through that week that caused me to feel X, Y, Z, and how I dealt with it at that time, or what it's made me realize. So it's been a journey of realization that there's been, there's an opportunity for me to, as much of this as possible in order to be able to really deal with deep-rooted stuff that I've just kind of just kept under wraps for a long, long time.
Yeah, no, I resonate out a lot. When I had my first session, I'm quite an open person, so going to a therapy session, I think sometimes, you know, they have to like pry out knowledge from you. I came and I'm like, this is everything that's going on. And like, I just spoke. But I must say it was very, what's the word? Like, I guess it was a relief to speak to someone that I didn't know, which was, I thought was great. And so there's no judgment behind it. And we're tackling an issue, not like me as a person, just like the issue behind it. So I thought it really helped me. And because of that, I actually, last 6 months, I'm now certified as a hypnotherapist, because I'm like, that helped me. So I'm like, I want to do the same for like other
Amazing.
people. And when you were talking about the mind-body connection, what I learned in hypnotherapy, it's blown my mind on how much that connection is. Like, I've read books about it, like The Body Keeps the Score and so on. So I understand it is there, but going through that course and learning, you're like, wow, there's so much more behind this than like you ever think. And like that's why when you're talking about it was the back pain, but and then you're like, it's actually the emotions. I'm like, yeah, I figured it would be, because that was what I learned as well.
Yeah.
So you guys said with Safe Space, you said something on Mimi's podcast, and you said, which I resonated with, because I think about it in the same, I was relating it to like my therapy stuff. You're like, we want to work with people who like share our vision or like share our message. And we don't like, our job is not to like convince other people. And I think that's the same applies to hypnotherapy, because I think with hypnotherapy in particular, there's a stigma around it. People are like, oh, I'm hypnotized, I'm gonna like bark like a dog and stuff. I'm like, no. I'm like, well, I don't blame you for thinking that way, because that's how I used to think as well. So working with people that share your vision, I get, and I can see that would be like an easy conversation, and the benefits are a lot more receptive and clear. But the question then becomes, if we want to grow, if we want to start growing this awareness and growing that, eventually we're going to have to start convincing those people that we don't want to convince. So what do you think we need to start doing to start dragging those people in, or to start being like, guys, by the way, you should take a look at this?
So I think we can't drag people. I think we'd probably get arrested for that. So I'm going to like... there's something that yeah, so I think there's like something that I don't know, it's like what my mum always told me about boys, and she was just like, always make them think it was their idea in the first place. So
negotiation tactics, nice.
Yeah, so I think what we're doing at Safe Space is really kind of making it as attractive as possible. Yeah. So like when in the good old days, when we used to have our meetup group at Tanya's Tea House, like, couldn't there be a more lovely place on the planet to talk about our emotions than Tanya's Tea House? It's pink and it's wonderful, and it's, you know, these amazing photos on the wall. Like, we want to put mental health in places where people don't expect them to be. We want to kind of make it a party that everyone just wants to turn up and be on the guest list for anyway. So I think it's about making our product as good as possible. Sure. In order for those stragglers, let's say, the people that are on the outskirts, to hear literally through that word of mouth, through like, oh, I went to this session the other day, kind of blew my mind, wasn't expecting it, this happened, I learnt this, oh my gosh, that's really interesting, you know, and let that ruminate a little bit. But I think part of our strategy is, and completely, you know, intentional, when we started working with businesses, is that's where we can kind of prey on the unexpected, because people go to work and they're just assuming that their boss has their best interest at heart, and then Safe Space pops up with a wonderful interactive session, now a virtual session, and they'll almost kind of like bamboozle them a little bit. They're in the session whether, you know, so I kind of joke and jest, it's not done in that way, but in a sense that when we're at that work in that different culture, it's not necessarily just something that was our idea in the first place. Yeah. So this is why we're working with businesses, HR leaders, people who want to be able to make sure that their business is, you know, thriving. And part of that, as different as we can kind of split it, is mental health is good for business. If you have a workforce that feel more fulfilled, they're going to be more creative, more innovative, more productive. Benefit. It's too many to mention. So by having sessions that we, again, that sort of mystery of mental health, we're not going in there talking to them about depression, anxiety and stress. Sure. We're going in there talking to them about stuff they do every day, like sleep, like relationships, like self-esteem and self-confidence. And again, package it in a way like, oh, I could do with more self-confidence. So this is how we're going to give it to you. So if we address those areas of people's life that are a little bit out of balance or they want to be better in, that essentially will roll up to better mental health. So again, it's the sneaky back route of trying to kind of get this message across, because we don't necessarily want everybody to, get on board with this topic, or I don't necessarily think that everybody has to get into therapy, but I think we do need to sleep better, and we do need to eat better, and we need to have confidence and self-esteem and better relationships and better communication, and then organically, we'll heal the world. But that's our kind of starting place.
Yeah, and I think you guys are doing a really great job in using the right topics when you go into those conversations. Like you correctly said just now, it's not about talking about depression and anxiety. You want to talk about something that when I go to work every day, what am I feeling? That stress, I have a deadline, or the pressure from my boss, or like, I'm upset with my colleague, whatever it might be. And I think what you guys are doing, addressing those topics, makes it a lot more relatable. And on some level, I think everyone faces it, but sometimes you're not aware of it. And bringing that, I guess, to the forefront to make one person in that, in those workshops be like, I do feel that stress, and that's why it's affecting me. It's a ripple effect. And like you said, you want it to grow organically. And I know you guys like to use data, like actual data, because you said mental health is good for business, which it is.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, how effective has using the data been? Because I look at it on, like, let's say we have a guy who's a company who's like 50% there, 50% convinced about mental health. In your experience, has the data been enough to like push them over when you show them actual like numbers, or is it there's still another step that we need to take after showing you that number?
Yeah, everybody, from a statistics perspective, from a, data perspective, the more the merrier. So
sure.
If you've got case studies coming out your ears, if you've got stats based on, populations of thousands of people, case studies like businesses that are the same as theirs, people will obviously a lot more easily buy into this. So there's not enough, and we're kind of working on that. Also, from like a research perspective, there's still not enough research that's regionally based. There's lots of kind of
actually, that's true, yeah.
There's a really important study that Deloitte did on the return on investment, organizations that are investing in mental health, but it's all based on organizations in the UK, and then lots of studies based on the US. So when it comes to here, we need to give people as little get out clauses as possible. Say, that's in the UK, that's not us. That's the US, that doesn't represent us. And we need to be conducting that research here to be able to say, this is what's happening, this is our plan of action, our methodology, these are the results, you're going to be one of those results too. Would you like to get involved? So we do, at this point in time, and actually the other thing is everything's changed, so even if we did have research, what I'm looking for now to put like storytelling together is research that has been released in the past, weeks. Puts into consideration a ridiculously traumatic event that everybody's just experienced for a ridiculously long amount of time. So, we don't have the numbers. So sometimes we require a little bit of faith. And I think it is, and this was like along the like-minded people, I don't want to waste my time convincing people that this is the right thing to do. People need to come a little bit closer to us and understand, for whatever reason, even if it is just financial bottom line reasons, or their competitors doing it so they want to do it too, or the reputation of their company through their employees' eyes is terrible, so they want to give them something to do. Okay, let's start there, guys. But the key thing is that whatever we're doing is not a band-aid. This is a long-term strategy. This is a slow burner. This is not going to be a magic wand that we wave overnight. So come with realistic expectations as well. Have the vision, do your research, and then, it is going to be those more forward-thinking leaders that are going to be the ones that implement this in their organizations. And that's the people that we want to play with for now. And we show that it works. We get more data, we prove it, and more people can kind of come and join the party. Yeah,
it's like a building block effect. And what you said about like having, do you think, I think the point you mentioned that we need data about here. I think that's very important because I don't think there is data available about that. You would know more. That's your space.
Bits.
Yeah, but it's not something specific. But I know you guys actually do surveys, right? Or like assessments that you like send out to companies. So is there anything from the data that you guys have gathered or the feedback that kind of surprised you? Or is there an area that like people seem to be a lot more drawn towards?
It's not surprising, I suppose. Like really the key to our audit is to measure the psychological safety within teams. So we're talking about, is there trust? Is there communication? Is there, can you be vulnerable? Can you talk about your mental health? Just for us to understand the lay of the land. Sometimes it will kind of come up in those situations where, as much as the manager who sits on his kind of throne believes that everybody trusts, there's been a break of trust, even if it's between HR and the employees once in a blue, many moons ago, and people can't get over that. But sometimes it's not even what's happened in that organization. It's where the people have been in the past. And I think because like turnover is a lot higher than it used to be, our generation, we move around because we're searching for, the dream job. And even if we've worked at a company down the road where our HR manager screwed us over, we come into our new job
with that baggage.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it's difficult for us to really just, look at one organization as a little island because there's lots of stuff that's kind of happening around that. So like some of the key indicators that we kind of put in there but didn't realize how powerful it would be is reputation. So one of the questions in our audit is, how positively do you speak about your work, your colleagues and your management outside of work? And, we all gossip. We all have a little bit of a rant now and then to get it off our chest. But I think that is something from a managerial perspective where it really kind of transforms. I think even these sort of things that you would think would be actually more higher up on their pecking order of like trust and communication, if people are speaking badly about it, it hits the core somewhere different where they're like, oh, right, okay, yeah, we need to address this because this is not good. For business. This is not what my aspirations were for being, a company owner.
Yeah.
And then I think the other key thing is about how, like, the honesty around mental health. We ask a question: if you took days off due to your mental health, or you've been unproductive due to your mental health, were you transparent about the reason with your line manager? And even like some companies that do have like mental health policies, like mental health days in place, still have people that can't be truthful about it. And again, I think that's not the island of the organization, it's the world island that we live on. That people still are in a place where they, it would be easy to say I've got a migraine, then the wheels are falling off and I just need a day to get myself back together. So I think what we've been through recently has really personified that, because at the moment nobody wants to be the weakest link. There's so much uncertainty in jobs that if somebody says, actually I'm struggling with stress and anxiety, or I've been having therapy, or I'm on medication now, and they really don't have full trust in the process that that's not going to go against them as being a weak link, because we still have this underlying concept that somebody who is stressed, anxious, medicated, in therapy is not as functioning as somebody else.
Yeah.
When, I can challenge that. I'm in therapy, I'm medicated with supplements, but, I am going to be a better employee than anybody who's denying themselves that kind of fact in order to be able to just show up at their job. So it needs that bit of imagination, I think, from an open-mindedness from employers to really be able to, again, go a little bit deeper and further with that and get the right people for the job. I think there's so many good points there. First of all, something I never considered, and I've been reflecting on it myself as we've been speaking, is the baggage that you carry. And that is something that I know I have, but I've never thought of it in that way. Like, for example, like the corporate world for me is, I had, an experience there, and I said after that, I'm like, I never need to be there again. I'd rather work in a startup for the rest of my life if I have to. But I never thought of it in that way until just now, that, this is baggage I'm carrying. I thought, now this is just a perception I have. I never looked at it as baggage. So that's really interesting.
And I think the point you mentioned about not looking at it, you can't look at it as an island. You have to really look at the bigger picture in order to understand what's happening on that island. There's a lot more that goes into, oh, this is just this company that's doing this or whatever. And one thing you said, which I think is priceless, is reputation. I don't know how many people I could speak to, honestly, that could look at it kind of be like, yeah, that's good. Whether you're working there or have left, I don't think many people can say that. And that's a shame because, again, we spend, I don't know, most of our lives at work. I don't know what the statistic is, but I know it's a lot of our time at work anyway. So if you're in that environment, you're not feeling too good, like all these things are playing into it. It's just not a good way to go about it yourself or for the business.
Yeah.
And I know, so Safe Space, you guys have been going now for 2 years about?
Yeah.
2 years. And I love what you guys said. It's not training, it's life-changing. I'm like, that's the best marketing phrase I've ever heard. That's fantastic. And you also mentioned on Mimi's podcast that what your mission is to take something mystical and make it something practical, to demystify all this, like the airy-fairy stuff around mental health.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, from when you started Safe Space, you probably had a perception about mental health. Mm-hmm. And now, unlike in business and personally, and now here we are 2 years later, personally you've gone to therapy, you have a new perception of mental health, but also in a business perspective, what has been the biggest learning for you, or what is something that your perception has completely changed from when you started to where you are right now?
So Safe Space started as a community initiative. We weren't a business. We never had aspirations of being a business or a social enterprise. We weren't about generating revenue. We were just about helping people. It was a noble cause. Brought together people who had, walked that walk, bringing together professionals that could talk the talk, and just creating this ecosystem that worked. So everything that we did is completely free of charge in the community. People would attend for free. Gorgeous Tanya at Tanya's Tea House would give the space for free. The professionals would give their time for free, and it just worked. Yeah. So at that point, I think my beliefs were everything had to be face to face. Because it's emotions, it's humans. We have to be able to be in each other's space. And that I think one of the beliefs were that what we were doing had to be, like I said, this noble cause, that we had to just bring people who were very passionate and make it happen. I think what we found out sort of throughout that process is, and this again, it was our mindset and people that surrounding us to help us kind of shift that mindset, is you can only help a very limited amount of people by doing things that way.
That's a good point.
And that you have to approach this and, as, an entrepreneurially, let's say, in order to be able to have that impact. And I think, we'd not really had our eyes fully open to the concept of social impact or social enterprise and what that meant, and how, you can actually do a lot with very little when you kind of bring everything together and resources, but put together a product or a package that you can sell, you can generate revenue through with the right target audience. So hence why we moved from having our community meetup group to then helping businesses and providing sort of solutions for businesses, because what does that do? It helps us to keep the work that we do in the community free, and it helps us to do even more of the work in the community. So it's always our why. It has changed, but it's at the core of everything we do. So we work with organizations to keep doing more of this stuff, and that's essentially our new ecosystem. And the more organizations we can work with, the bigger projects, the bigger brands we can partner with, insurers that we can partner with, we are open to partnership with anybody in that sense. Anyone, in order for us to be able to, everybody, in order to be able to pay it forward and put it back into the hands of the people that do need it, that don't work for an organization that's forward thinking, who aren't covered by insurance in that sense, and will be able to get this information for anyone else. Anyone else that's just, overwhelmed with information, and, there's so much that's out there on Google, but if we can help simplify that journey for a few more people, then our work here is done.
Yeah, I think you made a good point that you realize with the community meetups that they're great, but you're not going to be able to help as many people as you potentially could if you grew this to online and stuff, which this year I think has blown out the water. Yeah. And I like how you guys look at the work, you use the work you do to keep that, the essence of why this all started going. I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think it sticks to the why, like you said, the why of why did this all start? You know, we just want to help people and whatever they're struggling with, their mental health, if they can't get it at work, we're giving them a place to do that. So I'm curious, how has, I guess, the community grown in that time? How, like, what has changed? Is it, you know, I know it's probably a lot bigger than it was when you guys started. So just walk us through, like, how that community has grown.
Yeah, so I think there's still people that are angry at the moment that we aren't meeting up face to face again, and that's never say never. We will go back to face to face meetups and supplement that as well when the timing's right. So obviously being called safe space, you know, and while we're still wearing masks or while we're still kind of like sat 2 meters away from us, it makes like the dimension just a little bit kind of different. So once that's kind of out of the way, then that's definitely back on the card. So I think the people that are following us now, you know, still some diehard, like hardcore community members that have like come on this full journey with us, and really, you know, for us, it isn't about the quantity, you know, it's about the quality. So if I talked about this the other day, like really just going back through our database and looking at people who've signed up, and even if, you know, we did a campaign and only half of those people opted in again, we want to be able to have a quality message for where we're up to right now in order to be able to interact with those people. And again, that's what that goes back to the marketing zone. Exactly, you know, yeah. So it's not about number of followers and all those things for us. It's about us being able to have quality interactions with the people that do follow us, and kind of whether it's that in a business sense, we're not going to be for everybody, like we mentioned at the beginning. So if we can be there for the people that need it, then that's what we're up to.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, you want to help the people that genuinely like want that help. You know, I guess you can spread the message as much as you want, but really helping the people who support you and who are champions of what you guys do in your community, I think is much more valuable to you. And again, it goes back to the why you guys started all this. And I know, Dani, you're an integrative health coach, right? And a strategic health consultant. So I was thinking, how has that played into the work you do? Because I'm sure, like, and again, it's mental health, but I'm sure that experience has definitely helped you in the work you do now. And I also know you guys have a team of experts around you, you know, from hypnotherapists to coaches and so on. So how does bringing all of that, I guess, knowledge help you guys in the work you've been doing? Yeah,
so I fell into the healthcare industry completely by accident and completely against my will. Okay. So the agency that I was working at the time, I just had the least number of projects. So when we got the opportunity to work with Pfizer at the time, I was just too slow to hide under the desk, and the project landed on my table, and I was really against it. It was like not aligned with my values. I was just like, this is going to be really quite boring and so regulated, and from a marketing perspective, I'm not going to be able to do anything. There's no digital happening. And, you know, over the sort of 6 years that I worked on healthcare projects, I slowly realized that sometimes you've got to get, you know, completely the opposite of what you wanted to really sort of find out how you can make an impact on a whole industry that has a lot of problems and a lot of challenges. Yeah. So it wasn't my plan at all. And as I slowly got more and more into it and kind of seeing things, again, face value, good things and bad things, it just gave me more fuel, more passion that something had to change in this space. So I've always been quite passionate about demystifying health. You know, mental health is a chunk of that. And that's essentially when I trained to become health coach, and it wasn't necessarily to become a coach, like on a one-to-one basis. I'm a marketeer, I do one-to-many stuff, but I wanted to know this different space that wasn't, again, medical doctor health. It was a different sort of version of health. And I'd been I worked with a health coach myself, and similar to you, it was just like, wow, I want to know what these people know. And I studied for 1.5 years, and I got my qualification, and it's a very holistic approach, and in essence it's at the foundation of what we do now with Safe Space. So like I was talking about, the sleep, nutrition, you know, self-esteem, self-confidence, all those relationships, all those areas of life, we talk about that in the health coach sort of world too. So knowing again that sort of bio-individuality that we have is again something that I brought through from my health coaching, and has allowed me now with that mental health journey of my own, background in marketing, working in the healthcare industry, plus the health coach equals safe space, or my role within what safe space looks like. And that's kind of what I bring to the table in that sense, you know, combined with, you know, Helen's creativity and Leanne's sort of like epic ability at sort of putting the brand and the projects together. That's sort of what brings it together. You can't do anything on your own. So we need some friends to help you out along the way.
100%. But like you said, I think given like those 4 areas that you mentioned, like as a health coach, your own mental health journey, working in the healthcare sector, like all that really gives you like a good base to be doing the work that you've been doing, because you understand you understand that industry, not just from a mental health perspective, but from a health perspective. So I also worked in my last job in the health sector, and I didn't plan for it either. But I was in sales, so I was selling like a platform for companies to do clinical trials. Okay. So when you were talking about like it's hard marketing and that, I'm like, yeah, I remember those meetings, sitting down with like our marketing director, and to be like, man, how are we gonna like market like this? yeah, exactly. And there's so much regulation, and there's a lot of good being done, but when you enter that industry, you also learn about there's a lot of underlying things that no one talks about and no one sees. Until you get into it, I don't think you'd know about it, about some big companies that we will not mention for other reasons.
Yeah, we don't want to get deported.
Yeah. Dani, I want to be conscious of our time today. So I've just got 2 more questions for you. This is a question I recently added to the podcast, but I really like it and everyone seems to enjoy it. So looking back at your career, your mental health journey, all the work that you've done, what would you say is either your proudest moment, or what are you most proud of for yourself?
Oh, that's a tricky one, isn't it? I'm just proud to still be standing. Like, I know that kind of sounds a little bit cliche, but I shouldn't be, and I am. And I think having transformed what I've been through into what my future's going to be, like, that is an epic achievement. I mean, it's, you know, it's daily progress, and sometimes it takes more energy than other days to be able to kind of keep on that track. But I've got to kind of just be realistic. Like, I've achieved so much, like so much. So there wouldn't be one thing that I could really hang my hat on, apart from just still keep doing it.
Yeah.
And my relentless nature for keeping doing it too. Yeah.
But I think that's something they should be proud of. Like making those transformations is the hardest part. I always think that your biggest obstacle in your life is yourself. That other side of you, that the voice in the back of your head that says like, you're bad, you can't do this. So to make that guy like just relax, and like to put him away sometimes, and to make that voice a little quieter, that's not easy. That takes a lot of work. So you should be proud, and congratulations.
Yay, me.
And for my last question, Dani, that I ask all my guests is, what is the message you'd like people to take home with them today?
I wasn't prepared for this. So I think that it's about not just taking, it's funny because I was talking to this in a session just today, but not looking at life as one big runway, but like the baby steps that you can take. So even we were talking today, it was a session about 2021, and people like just so overwhelmed to think it was a whole another year to come. And you just got to take, it's not even like each month at a time, or each week at a time, or each day at a time. Sometimes it's each hour at a time. And if you can kind of break it down into those little small digestible chunks, and just get through the next hour, or even next minute if you're in that zone. You know, sometimes like if you're having a panic attack, or if you're kind of really against the odds, like just go for the minutes. So yeah, breaking things down into like really easy steps, and having compassion for yourself along the way. Like, there's just, I think, not enough of it out there, especially that we give ourselves, in order to just be like, you know, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
You're doing okay.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful message, and I really resonate with that, especially the part about being more compassionate to yourself. You know, there's that famous thing that people always say, treat yourself like you treat your best friend. You would never, no matter how much your best friend messed up, you might be harsh, but you're never going to say what you would say to yourself. And that always sticks with me. But again, it is not the easiest thing to do, but it takes time, and you get better at it. And also breaking things down into much more like simpler things. Just gives you that. That's how that momentum builds. That's how the motivation builds. Instead of like looking at where you want to be in like a year, 2 years, and it's like 20 million things that you have to do. So yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Dani, thank you so much for your time today and for coming on the show. I've been really looking forward to this, and I love this conversation. This is an area I'm passionate about, and you are too. So these are always fun conversations for me. And just, yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Anytime. Guys, to everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. And as always, hope it helps. Peace.